There is a sentence being whispered more and more often around warm-up arenas, breeding barns, auction halls, and international dressage shows. We are burning them out too young. What was once a quiet concern shared privately between riders and trainers has now exploded into one of the biggest welfare debates in modern dressage. Because across the equestrian world, people are beginning to ask a question that strikes directly at the heart of the sport itself. How young is too young? A recent article from Eurodressage titled FN Hot Iron Debate, How Young is Too Young, has reignited a conversation that many people believe dressage can no longer avoid. The phrase hot iron is powerful because it suggests something being shaped quickly before it cools, bent before it is ready, forced into form while it's still vulnerable. For many critics of the modern sport horse industry, that metaphor feels painfully accurate. They believe young horses are being pushed into systems of training, competition, and commercial pressure long before their bodies and minds are fully developed. Today's dressage horses are growing up in a completely different world than the horses of previous generations. 4-year-olds are expected to move with spectacular suspension and elasticity. 5-year-olds are competing internationally in young horse championships. 6 and 7-year-olds are already being marked as future Grand Prix stars with enormous sums of money. Some become breeding sensations almost overnight. The pressure surrounding these horses has never been greater, and many people are beginning to wonder whether the sport has started prioritizing early brilliance over long-term welfare. If you watch modern young horse classes, one thing immediately stands out. The movement is huge. Front legs snap upward dramatically. Hind legs push with incredible power. Everything looks extravagant, electric, and eye-catching. These performances dominate social media clips and auction promotions because spectacular movement sells. But critics increasingly ask whether this type of movement is truly sustainable. The question whether these horses are genuinely moving in balance or whether tension, compression, and physical strain are being rewarded because they create visual excitement. For years, breeding trends have pushed the sport toward more extravagant movement. Auction houses celebrate foals with massive elasticity. Young stallions become international celebrities after only a handful of performances. Breeders compete to produce horses with more suspension, more front leg action, more dramatic mechanics. Over time, the incentives of the sport slowly shifted. Instead of prioritizing longevity, rideability, and durability, the industry increasingly rewarded horses that look spectacular at very young ages. That shift matters because classical dressage was never designed to be rushed. The old masters spoke constantly about patience and gradual development. Horses were strengthened slowly over many years through gymnastic training. Collection was introduced carefully. Grand Prix was considered the final result of years of physical and mental development, not something horses were expected to prepare for while still immature. A horse was not considered truly finished until much later in life. But modern economics changed everything. Young horse championships became major commercial showcases. Breeding evolved into a global industry worth millions. Stud books compete fiercely for prestige and relevance. A spectacular 5-year-old can suddenly become an international breeding phenomenon. Early success now creates enormous financial opportunity. And when money enters a system, pressure follows naturally. That pressure does not always look dramatic or abusive on the surface. Sometimes it happens gradually and almost invisibly. Horses begin intensive work slightly earlier. Competition schedules become busier. Travel increases, rest periods shrink. Training expectations rise little by little. The line between careful development and commercial production begins to blur. Many veterinarians and welfare advocates point to physical maturity as one of the biggest concerns. A horse's spine continues developing for years. Joints, tendons, ligaments, and soft tissue structures are still stabilizing long after horses enter serious training programs. Yet, some young horses are already being asked for elevated movement, advanced balance, collection, and compression at very early ages. Critics argue that the cumulative strain may not always show immediate damage, but instead creates wear that surfaces later in the horse's career. And then there is the mental side of the conversation, which many people believe is often ignored. Young horses are not machines. They are animals trying to process training pressure, transportation, competitions, loud environments, expectations, confinement, and rider demands all at once. Some horses cope well, but others struggle emotionally, even if they remain physically sound. Critics argue that mental stress is far more difficult to measure than lameness, which makes it easier for the industry to overlook. This debate is becoming especially explosive because dressage itself is already under enormous public scrutiny. Over the past several years, the sport has faced repeated welfare controversies involving hyperflexion, blue tongues, harsh training footage, judging scandals, and abusive investigations. Public trust has been shaken repeatedly, and many outside observers are beginning to question whether elite dressage truly reflects the harmony and partnership it claims to celebrate. That larger context changes how people interpret young horse training today. When spectators see extremely young horses ridden in compressed frames or pushed into extravagant movement, they no longer view it in isolation. Instead, many see it as part of a broader culture that may be prioritizing medals, sales, and spectacle over welfare. And perception matters. Modern equestrian sport is increasingly dependent on public acceptance. Younger generations, especially, are asking harder questions about ethics, welfare, and transparency. They are less willing to accept "this is how it has always been done" as an explanation. That cultural shift is forcing dressage into a moment of self-examination, unlike anything the sport has faced before. What makes this conversation so complicated is that there are valid arguments on both sides. Many trainers strongly defend young horse classes and believe proper training does not harm horses. They argue that talented horses enjoy work, benefit from structured education, and develop confidence through competition experience. They point out that not every young horse program is abusive or rushed, and that many professionals genuinely prioritize welfare and long-term soundness. And that is absolutely true. There are riders producing horses carefully and patiently. There are breeders focused on temperament, durability, and rideability, rather than only spectacle. There are trainers who refuse to compromise horse welfare for short-term success. But critics argue that the larger system itself still creates unhealthy incentives. If judges reward extreme movement, breeders will continue producing extreme movement. If buyers pay massive sums for spectacle young horses, trainers will continue pushing for spectacular young performances. If championships celebrate early brilliance, then early brilliance becomes the goal. Systems shape behavior, even when individuals within those systems care deeply about horses. One of the most emotional parts of this debate involves comparisons to legendary horses of the past. Many older champions were late developers. Some were awkward as young horses. Some may never have won modern young horse classes at all. Yet they became extraordinary Grand Prix horses because they were given time to mature physically and mentally. That raises a difficult question. Would some of dressage's greatest historical horses even survive today's marketplace? For many long-term horsemen and women, that question feels deeply uncomfortable. Because if the sport increasingly filters out horses that mature slowly, what kind of future are we creating? Are we breeding athletes for longevity and partnership? Or are we creating short-term performance designed to peak as quickly as possible? Perhaps the most important thing about the hot iron debate is that these conversations are finally happening openly. For years, criticism of young horse systems often stayed private because speaking publicly could create backlash inside the industry. Now, respected riders, trainers, breeders, and welfare advocates are beginning to discuss these concerns publicly. That alone suggests the culture itself may be starting to shift. The FEI and national federations are already facing increasing pressure to prioritize horse welfare reforms across equestrian sport. Public scrutiny is not going away. If anything, it is becoming more intense every year, and the future of dressage may ultimately depend on whether the sport can convince people that horse welfare truly comes first. Thank you so much for joining us, and remember, I am not AI.